I used to think the truth had a sound like the soft click a lock makes before a door opens. I waited years for that sound, held my breath at every, almost convinced the next chamber would be the one that finally let me through. I'm 38, a woman who earns a living teaching restless kids how to hold a violin like it won't break their hearts. My name is Mara, and I learned early that you can practice something for 10,000 hours and still be unprepared for the single moment that matters. The night it began, I was standing in my mother's kitchen, wearing my father's old cardigan sleeves swallowed to my knuckles, listening to my sister Lila tell me she'd sold the house. She said it like she was reading the weather. Sun in the afternoon, wind at night, your childhood is gone by morning. I felt my age then not as a number, but as sediment, all the silted years settling at once. I'd paid the taxes when Mom forgot, signed for the roof repair when the shingles lifted like scabs, spent Saturdays repainting the porch with a brush, so frayed it left the wood showing through. I had kept this house standing the way you keep a body standing when it has decided to fall. It was the right thing, Lila said, tossing her hair back so the diamond at her throat snatched light. Before the market turns. She always spoke as if the market were a temperamental god she alone could appease. I asked where Mom was, and Lila shrugged toward the den, the television humming its blue faith. When I tried to walk past her to find our mother, she stepped in front of me, the way you step between a flame and the thing you mean to burn. Papers are signed, she said. We close next Friday. I wasn't born dramatic, life taught me. My father was a pastor with a voice that made strangers cry. He died when I was 19, in a fire that started in the church kitchen and took more than hymnals with it. My mother learned to survive by turning feelings into chores. Grief for her was a to-do list: donate the suits, cancel the cell plan, bake a casserole for Mrs. Abramson, who had always looked hungry when he preached. By the time I was 25, I'd paid off Dad's leftover debts with money I made playing weddings, smiling at couples who mouthed vows like incantations. Lila, 2 years younger, studied branding and learned how to move through rooms as if they had been arranged for her. She was the girl with the sunlit childhood, the one people adored in photographs, even when they didn't remember the party. "You can't sell the house without me," I said, my voice lowering the way it does, just before a string snaps. Dad left it to Mom and Mom left it to me, she said. Last year, we saw a lawyer. Durable, whatever. She wants me to handle things now that she's, you know. She made a vague circle near her temple as if my mother's forgetfulness were a smudge you could wipe off with better lighting. I knew the faltering had started, words slipping from Mom's pockets, names missing their chairs at dinner. But I also knew what she remembered perfectly: my father's laugh, her garden gate squealing the way Lila had looked at 13 with braces and a fever. I didn't believe Mom had wanted to sign anything. But belief is a soft country. Paper is iron. I could have begged. I have begged less deserving people for less important things. Instead, I asked to see the documents. Lila smiled, a smile I recognized from mirrors I used to trust. "They're at my place," she said, as if her apartment 4 blocks away were an embassy to which I needed a visa. "I'll send you a copy." She didn't. She never does. And yet I kept checking my inbox, the way you check an oven, when you know you never turned it on. Touch the handle, feel only heat you made yourself. That night I slept in my old room with the window cracked, inhaling the cold salt of the harbor. I kept thinking how houses are like instruments, wood that remembers weather, joins that ache when the air changes. This one had learned our footsteps, catalogued them, memorized where we paused. It had held our arguments in its drywall and let them fade in paint. When I was little, Dad would kneel with me at the baseboards and show me where the nail heads whispered where settling wasn't failure, but proof the structure was alive. He used to say, "What bends doesn't necessarily break." I wanted to believe him, but I hadn't yet met the kind of people who smile while they're bending you. In the morning, Mom was sitting at the table in her robe, staring at a spoon, like it had asked her a question she couldn't answer. "Mama," I said, touching her wrist. She flinched the way people do in the moment between sleep and day. and then her eyes softened, clearing a space for me. Mara Bird, she said. She remembered. I made oatmeal the way she likes it, too much cinnamon, and told her I'd hang the laundry after my lessons. I did not ask about the house. I was afraid of the shape her silence would take. I was afraid of what I would do if she said she had chosen Lila, because I had always chosen everyone else. At noon, while my student scratched at the Allegro like he was trying to dig his way out, a text arrived from an unknown number. Your presence at the closing isn't necessary. I felt something inside me tilt an angle too subtle to see, unless you've been staring level for a long time. I ended the lesson early and walked to Lila's building, each step a decision. My sister answered in leggings and a sweatshirt with the logo of a company that makes promises. She let me in with the lazy grace of someone who enjoys the choreography of being wanted. On her dining table lay a spread of papers and a pen so heavy it looked like intention made metal. I recognized Mom's signature the way it had shrunk. I recognized the notary's seal. I recognized the lie in the line that said of her own free will. What did you tell her? I asked. The sun slid behind a roofline, trimming Lila's cheekbones in winter. Only the truth, she said. That you're tired. That you shouldn't have to keep carrying this house. That Dad would have wanted what's best for us. I laughed then, a sound that didn't feel like mine. You think us means you, I said. You think best means the thing you can sell. Something flickered, and for the first time that day she looked almost human. You always thought you were the daughter who stayed, she said softly. But staying is just a way of hiding, Mara. You hid in this house. You hid in your students' mistakes. You hid in taking care of Mom so you'd never have to notice that Dad chose you for the ugly truths, and me for the beautiful ones. What does that even mean? It means, she said, and hear her voice thin, that Dad told you things he didn't tell me. The room went quiet in that way that isn't silence so much as everything leaning in. She was right. Once the winter before he died, Dad had called me to the garage and shown me a metal file box under a blanket of drop cloths. In case you ever need to know more than the story everyone prefers, he'd said, smiling like a man who has learned to live with his secrets. I was 19, and 19-year-olds mistake tenderness for warning. After the fire, I never went looking for that box, afraid of becoming the kind of person who opens it. Now I knew I had to, because this wasn't just about a house or a signature. It was about the kind of daughter I had been, the kind of woman I had become, and whether I would let my life be sold in rooms where I wasn't invited to speak. I left Lila's apartment without taking the copies she offered. Paper can be forged, memory too, but metal boxes have their own patience. On the walk home, a storm began, small knives of rain. I ran my palm along the chain link near the church lot and felt how cold makes a pattern honest. In the garage, I found the drop cloths where Dad had left them, folded with his particular thrift, and beneath a file box the color of an old bruise. The lock was simple. I have always been good at simple things. The box opened with a sigh, as if it had been waiting for breath. Inside there were folders thick with papers that smelled of smoke, though they had never been burned. My father's handwriting ran across the margins, confident loops, sudden slashes, the script of a man who believed in the permanence of ink. I sat on the concrete floor of that garage, the cold biting through my jeans, and read the first sheet I pulled out. It was a letter addressed to my mother, dated 10 years before I was born. The words shook me in ways I could never have rehearsed for. He wrote about a woman named Evelyn, about a love he could never erase, and about a child who might or might not be his. I wanted to throw up right there among the oil stains. My father, the man who had preached fidelity as if it were a commandment above the rest, had loved another woman before us. The folder beneath held receipts, monthly checks to a P.O. box, carefully recorded in his ledger. I counted years and years of them, even after I was born, even after Lila. My hands trembled. I told myself it wasn't true, that this was some misunderstanding, but the paper was relentless. I found a birth certificate. A boy. His last name was not ours, but the middle name was my father's. My mind kept reaching for denial, the way a drowning swimmer reaches for air only to come back with a mouthful of water. I thought of Lila's words. Dad told me things he never told her. Did she know about this? Did Mom? Did everyone but me know? I sat there for what felt like hours, flipping through documents that painted my father, not as the saint I had clung to, but as a man who had led two lives and built one on the ashes of the other. That night I confronted Mom. She was in her chair, her robe tied loose at her waist, staring at the muted glow of the television. I knelt in front of her, holding the birth certificate in my hands like a weapon. "Did you know?" I asked. At first her eyes clouded the way they do now, like she was searching for the hallway light switch. But then something sharper cut through. Her gaze met mine, and for a moment, she was the mother who used to braid my hair so tight it gave me headaches. She reached for the paper, her fingers trembling. She looked at the name and a tear slipped down her cheek. "I knew," she whispered. "I always knew." I fell back against the coffee table, my chest cracking open with disbelief. "And you stayed. You let him keep them while we played the perfect family." My voice broke into pieces I couldn't gather. Mom closed her eyes and her silence was heavier than shouting. When she finally spoke, her words came out small. "I loved him, and I couldn't raise two children on my own. Sometimes love is weaker than survival, Mara. And sometimes it's the same thing." I wanted to scream at her, shake her, force her to undo the years of pretending, but I couldn't, because in that moment I saw the truth of her, the weary, fragile truth of a woman who had chosen endurance over freedom. It didn't excuse her silence, but it explained it. And explanations are a cruel mercy. They make you understand just enough to hurt worse. The next morning, Lila came over with coffee in hand, all confidence, like she hadn't detonated my world the night before. "We need to talk about the move," she said. I dropped the birth certificate on the counter between us. For once she froze. Her face paled. And in that pause I knew she had known all along. "You knew," I said, my voice low. Her lips tightened. "I found out years ago. Dad told me when I turned 18. He said you weren't ready." The betrayal was a living thing in my throat. My father had trusted her with his sins and left me with his sermons. My sister had carried this secret smug in her role as the favored one, while I lived under the weight of lies I didn't even know I was bearing. My entire identity, that I was the daughter who stayed, the daughter who endured, the daughter who kept the house standing, was nothing more than the scaffolding of deceit. "You let me believe I was crazy for fighting you over the house," I spat. "You let me think it was about money when it was about this. All of this." She tried to reach for me, but I pulled back like her touch was fire. "Mara, listen." "No," I said. "You don't get to narrate this anymore. Not for me, not for Mom." For the first time in years, I saw fear in her eyes. Not because I would hurt her, but because I had finally seen her. And people like Lila thrive on invisibility, on being adored without scrutiny. The mask had slipped, and I would never let her put it back on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing my father's handwriting, hearing his voice in the sermons he used to give, wondering which words were for us, and which ones were meant to disguise his shame. I wanted revenge, yes, but more than that, I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to stop living in locked boxes and whispered conversations. If my father had buried us in secrets, I was ready to dig until my fingers bled. The days that followed felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. Every step cut deeper, yet I couldn't stop moving because standing still meant bleeding out where I was. I kept teaching, bowing my violin like it might carve out a space where none of this was real, but each note seemed to carry the weight of my father's secret, vibrating in the hollow wood like an echo of betrayal. My students noticed the difference. I saw it in their eyes, the way they hesitated before asking questions, sensing that I was elsewhere, drifting. I began searching for Evelyn, the woman from the letters. At first I told myself it was only to confirm the facts, to see if she still lived, to find out what had become of the boy with my father's name stamped in the middle. But deep down, I knew it was more. I wanted to confront her, to demand she share the burden of the story that had stolen my family's foundation. Late at night, with only the glow of my laptop and the hum of the refrigerator for company, I traced addresses, old phone numbers, fragments of an existence that had once run parallel to mine. When I finally found her, she lived 2 towns over in a house with faded green shutters. My hands shook as I pulled into her driveway, and for a moment I considered leaving, pretending I had never uncovered any of this. But then the door opened, and there she was. Older, of course, silver hair pinned back neatly, eyes tired but sharp. She looked at me with recognition before I even spoke. "You're Mara," she said softly. It felt like being struck. "How do you know me?" Her lips trembled into something like a smile. "Your father showed me pictures. You look just like him when he was young." The words sank into me like poison wrapped in honey. She invited me in, and against every instinct I followed. Her house smelled of lavender and dust, a life carefully tended but worn at the edges. On the mantel was a photograph of a young man no older than 20. His jawline was sharp, his hair dark and familiar. My father's features carved into another life. "That's Daniel," she said, her voice breaking. "Your brother." I sat on her couch, my legs numb. Brother. The word rang inside me, foreign and jagged. I had spent 38 years believing I was one of two sisters, shaped by the orbit of our parents' fractured love. And now here was proof that blood had written me into a story I never knew I was in. Evelyn spoke gently, as if afraid I might shatter. She told me how my father had loved her once, how he had promised things he could not keep. When he left, she never remarried. She raised Daniel alone, with only those envelopes of money arriving like apologies he could never say aloud. "He wanted to be there," she whispered. "But he thought he couldn't. He thought he'd ruin you if he tried." I laughed bitterly. "He ruined us anyway." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes, he did." When I drove home, I felt hollow, as if Evelyn's house had pulled the marrow out of me. I didn't know what to do with the knowledge that I had a brother who had grown up in the shadows of my life. I didn't know what to do with the image of my father, not as a saint, not as a hypocrite, but as a man who had broken everyone he loved in different ways. When I told Lila, her response was sharp, almost rehearsed. "So now you know. What difference does it make? He's dead. Daniel's grown. Evelyn survived. Mom already knew. Why are you tearing yourself apart over this?" "Because it was my life too," I snapped. "And none of you gave me the choice to know the truth. You all decided who I should be without letting me decide for myself." Lila scoffed. "You always need to turn everything into a tragedy. Maybe that's why Dad didn't tell you. You'd have turned his mistake into your whole identity." Her words cut, but I didn't let her see me bleed. I realized then that Lila had always thrived on control, and the secret had been her sharpest weapon. She had wielded it to keep herself above me, to justify every manipulation, every dismissal. But now the blade was dull. I knew too. And knowledge, even when it hurts, is its own kind of power. That night I dreamed of the house again, our house. The walls groaned under the weight of hidden truths, the windows fogged with years of silence. In the dream, I stood in the living room as the floorboards buckled and split. I could hear my father's voice somewhere far away, but the words blurred, indistinct. Only one thing was clear: the house was falling, and I had to decide whether to run or to let it bury me. When I woke, I knew what I had to do. If Lila wanted to sell the house, fine, but I would not let it disappear quietly like all the other secrets. I would fight not just for the building, but for the truth to finally have a voice. The past had taken enough from me. It was time for me to take something back. The day of the closing, I walked into that sterile office building with my heart pounding so loud it drowned out my footsteps. Lila was already there, dressed in her perfect tailored coat, her hair sleek, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. The lawyer shuffled papers, his pen poised like a judge's gavel. I sat down across from her, and for the first time I didn't feel like the smaller sister. I felt like a storm contained in skin. "Before we proceed," I said, my voice steady, "there's something everyone here needs to see." I pulled the folder from my bag, the birth certificate, the letters, the proof that our father had built one family on the bones of another. The lawyer frowned, confused. Lila's smile faltered. "This isn't relevant," she snapped, her voice too quick. "This is about the sale of the house. This is about the foundation of everything we are," I said. My throat burned, but I pressed on. Our father lied to all of us. He had a son, a life he hid. And you knew Lila. You knew, and you kept it from me. You let me bleed myself dry holding this family together while you held his secrets like a crown. The lawyer looked from me to her, uncertain. My mother sat in the corner, her eyes glassy but awake. She whispered something no one else heard, but I did. Enough. That word gave me strength. I laid out the documents on the table one by one. The letters, the checks, the birth certificate, Evelyn's address. The evidence was undeniable. And though it didn't erase the legality of the sale, it shifted the ground beneath our feet. Lila's poise cracked. She tried to argue, to deflect, but her voice shook. For the first time, the room saw her not as the golden daughter, but as the keeper of betrayal. I won't stop the sale, I said finally, but this house will not vanish into your ledger. Every penny from it will go to Mom's care, not to you, not to me, to her. Lila opened her mouth to object, but Mom's frail hand rose trembling, but resolute. Yes, she said, her voice small but clear. To me. It was the first time she had spoken with authority in months, and it silenced everything. The lawyer nodded, adjusting the paperwork. Lila sat stiff, her lips pressed thin, her power slipping through her fingers like sand. I watched her and felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. Because winning in this way wasn't victory, it was survival. When it was over, I drove back to the house one last time. The sun was setting, staining the sky with the bruised colors of endings. I walked through every room, touching the walls, the doorframes, the places where echoes still lived. In the living room, I knelt and pressed my palm to the floorboards where Dad had once told me that bending doesn't mean breaking. My hand shook. I whispered into the quiet, "You broke us anyway." But then I stood, because broken doesn't always mean finished. A week later, I met Daniel. He was taller than I expected, with the same crooked smile Dad used to wear when he tried to hide his nerves. We stood awkwardly at first, strangers bound by blood and betrayal. Then he said, "I always wondered if I had siblings." My chest cracked open, not with rage this time, but with something rawer, something closer to hope. We sat for hours sharing pieces of a puzzle we both wished we didn't have to solve. He told me about growing up without a father, about watching Evelyn carry weight she never let crush her. I told him about the sermons, about the fire, about holding a house together with hands that were never enough. By the end of the night, we weren't whole, but we weren't alone either. The house is gone now, sold to strangers who will never know its secrets. Mom is in a care home where she is safe, and sometimes she looks at me and still says, "Marabird." Lila and I no longer speak. I don't know if we ever will again. And maybe that's a kind of peace too, learning which ties are worth saving and which ones strangle more than they support. As for me, I am still here, bow in hand, teaching children how to make music from strings stretched to their breaking point. Maybe that's all life is, learning how to draw beauty from tension. I carry my father's betrayal, my mother's silence, my sister's deceit, but I also carry my own voice now. And with it, I can finally tell the truth. If you've listened this far, thank you for letting me lay down a story I carried too long in the dark. If my pain reached you, if it reminded you of wounds you're still holding, I hope you know you're not alone. Please share this story if it touched you. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the only way we heal is by speaking our truths and letting others hear them.